kind of have them bring up those stories? How do you train them to do something that's kind of very gut-rooted? And go ahead, Jeff, you can answer that first.
Okay, and let me go back to add on to what Laura said. It is important that both the parents and the students know what questions to ask and who to ask.
Yeah.
A lot of times questions are wasted on tour guides that really should be directed to Laura and her colleagues.
Yeah, that's good to know too.
What percentage of your faculty have in, the physics from the Ivy League, and what percentage, these really admissions driven questions, and and I have actually seen parents ask students how much financial aid they got. I mean, that's like asking someone how much money do you make?
That's pretty personal. Yeah.
Again, so I think Laura really answered that well. Ask the students about student life, and then save those admission-specific, financial aid-specific, program-specific questions, to the folks that are in admissions that really know them and are going to give you the right answer. For me, I think it's making sure that admissions and the tour guides are in sync and they know what each other is covering. And I think it's really empowering tour guides to have a general route and script, but to really know where to tell those personal stories, to know where to tell, this is my favorite spot on campus, or to give you that insider information about how to navigate the dining hall, or how to get along with your roommate, or those favorite traditions, or those favorite events of yours.
And how can you train them to do that delicately but personally too? How do you make them learn that balance? And Laura, you can go ahead with that one.
I think something that makes it easy at first is that when they take pauses at certain buildings, rather than talk about the history of the building, talk about the personality in that building. So when we walk by one of the academic buildings, talk about a class you had there, or a professor, or a study group. When we walk through the dining hall, talk about the conversations you've had there, or how much you love the food. When we walk by, our Thorne Hall, which is our main auditorium, talk about, the great guest speaker that you saw, how much fun you had.
Yeah.
Or, when you walk through the residence hall, stuff like that. So you don't have to, randomly memorize stories. It's, when you think of an area, just talk about how that particular area has influenced you. So like Jeff said, talk about your favorite spot on campus. When you get there, tell them, this is my favorite spot, and this is why it's my favorite spot. So it can be very natural. It doesn't have to feel forced at all, and it can be really informative at the same time.
And so you just kind of tell them how to do that, and then maybe give them examples or something, probably too.
This is also, we just tell them pause.
Yeah, it's also interesting for me because just a quick bit of information. I'm on the admissions team at my school, so I actually interview students, prospective students, and I give tours, and I do kind of repping my school, open house type things. So actually this is almost like training for me too. But but yeah, so anyway, and you brought up the financial aid question and how that can get personal. Do you have, like, how do you, well, anyway, what's the criteria for student tour guides? How do you choose the tour guides?
Well, I advertise in the student online newspaper, and then anyone who wants to apply, I'll let them apply, and I read all of their applications, seeing who is not just a numerical fit, who has a good GPA and a good major, but someone who can write well, who seems to express themselves thoroughly, someone who's had some kind of interesting experience, been engaged somehow, and then I'll whittle those down to some who I want to meet in person and just see how they present themselves, if they seem enthusiastic, lively, engaging, personable, because someone could have, incredible credentials on paper but not really cut it as a tour guide. So it's tough because sometimes people have great potential, but they may be a little shy in an interview, or sometimes people may not have the best credentials, but they may be a good representative of the school because they have great enthusiasm and they still have all those great personal stories.
And as a student, when I went to one of my, on one of the tours, I didn't really like the tour guide. and I kind of got just a bad vibe in general. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of, so you choose these tour guides, but if a student goes on a tour and they don't get a very good vibe from the tour guide, how much should that reflect on, or not even a good or bad vibe, but just, for instance, this girl wasn't someone, she was cool for like her category of person, but I didn't identify with what she was saying. How much should that reflect on the school as opposed to just reflecting on that specific tour guide? And then
Well,
Jeff,
it's funny.
Sorry, or both of you.
Jeff and I actually specifically dealt with that very particular issue. So it's very funny you bring it up.
I can hear a story behind that.
And the sad thing is that even though there's, we don't want to think that there's any one particular person who can or cannot be a tour guide. It is a reflection of the college, because that tour guide is the first student with whom you substantially interact. So that's how you're going to see the college. So even though she is not representative for every single student we have on campus, and no one student is, for every student on that tour guide is Oxy. And so it is very important.
And how should, like, for example, should I have not taken that into account as much as I did, or should I have assumed that maybe she was chosen because she reflected the school? What do you guys think? Go ahead, Jeff. You can take that one.
She could have been having a bad day.
But it wasn't negative. It was just a different type of, like,
it was a vibe.
Personality. Yeah.
And let me say, again, that's why you go to visit those campuses. But the word of advice I can give you and other prospective students is, one, research does show, unfortunately, if I don't like my tour guide, you're going to fall off my list or fall further down. That's a lot of pressure on a tour guide and on a school.
Yeah. Now,
that is in part why I recommend to many of our clients, expose me to more students, have a lobby host, have a lunch host.
Yeah, that's a...
Maybe halfway through the tour, you should change off tour guides,
or have two,
because brands are mirrors. Yeah, right, exactly. But then if, families can't, they need to not just take admissions point of view to the school, go into the student center, go into the coffee house, go to where students are congregating. I have learned at just about every college campus, if you walk up to students and say, "Hi, we're visiting, can we chat with you?" They will.
Yeah.
So you as prospective students just shouldn't, talk to your tour guide. Make time when you get on campus. Right, exactly.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt so far. But this brings me to another question. What do both of you think about summer visits, summer campus visits, and how can a student, if you only have a chunk of time during the summer, how do you make that worthwhile? Because for me, talking to students has been one of the most helpful things I've done. So how can I still get a good visit without talking to students except the tour guide? And Laura, go ahead and start off on that one. Then Jeff, you can add on.
That's tough, because actually my number one thing that I tell visitors who come during the summer is come back in the fall or the spring, because there just aren't as many students there. And I think in those instances you have to be, particularly inquisitive with your tour guide. You have to ask them all your questions, because our campus will be quieter in the summer. There are some students doing research, but that means that they're in their labs or in the classroom in the library doing work, so they're not necessarily available and visible throughout the campus. And I think sometimes the only time families have to visit is the summer, and I think a campus visit during the summer is better than no visit at all.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say that they should make every effort to come back to meet the students, because, like I've said, the students make the experience. The buildings are beautiful. You want to see that, but it's only half of the visit.
Exactly. Very true. And Jeff, what do you think about that?
I completely agree with Laura.